General Hospital will reveal the return of the Nurses' Ball to Port Charles was no longer just an annual entertainment event, it had become a whirlwind that swept through the entire town, illuminating the stage lights and unearthing long-buried secrets. This time, under the enthusiastic orchestration of Lucy, an indispensable soul to any Nurses' Ball night, the whole of Port Charles felt reignited by tantalizing promises and unimaginable surprises. With her signature charm and unmatched persuasive power, Lucy officially sparked a wave of excitement during her live interview on WXPC. She affirmed that this year would be different, not just for the glittering gowns or elaborate stage performances, but because this would be a night of shocks and truth-revealing moments that would leave the entire auditorium breathless. She had planned a performance so dramatic that no one could foresee it. And although she withheld specific details, the confidence in her every word left no room for doubt. A major event was quietly being prepared. What truly stirred the public was the cryptic tease of Lucky's possible return. His name was spoken like an old wound reopened, like a door once closed now slowly creaking open again. If Lucky were to actually appear, it wouldn't just be his voice stirring the stage, it would be the past itself, pouring back in torrents, sweeping in old memories and unhealed mistakes. Port Charles had never forgotten Lucky, and Lucy knew that. Her deliberate ambiguity only heightened expectations. As if the audience stood before an emotional time bomb ticking steadily toward detonation. But Lucy didn't stop there. She was also pushing for the return of Magic Milo, a fan-favorite act that once nearly set the hall on fire in previous years. Audiences had grown accustomed to his cheeky, sizzling performances. But this year, Lucy aimed to elevate everything to a whole new level, with heart-stopping choreography and screams of delight echoing throughout the room. Her goal was no longer elegance, but an explosion of emotion, wonder, and unforgettable nostalgia. She wanted to create a night that wouldn't just dazzle the eyes, but keep viewers awake long after, haunted by the lingering thrill. Kicking off with the star-studded red carpet on May 20th, this year's Nurses' Ball was designed as a visual feast, where fashion and personality took center stage. Lucy deftly avoided giving away any wardrobe details, but kept teasing the boldness of this year's styles, thanks to warmer weather. That alone sparked rumors of daring gowns and style twists that could set the runway ablaze. Her silence on the performance lineup only deepened the audience's curiosity, pulling them into a psychological game where she held all the strings. Yet beneath the dazzling exterior, Lucy knew the Nurses' Ball had never simply been about stage lights and laughter. It had always been a mirror held up to the cracks beneath the surface, the hidden truths, and the unraveling of those who seemed untouchable. From tearful confessions to fiery confrontations unfolding mid-performance, the ball had long been the backdrop for events that shifted the power dynamics of the entire town. And this year, whether intentionally or not, Lucy was laying the groundwork for history to repeat itself. Rumors spread like wildfire that certain figures from the distant past might re-emerge. An unfamiliar individual spotted near the venue during dress rehearsals raised suspicions that someone uninvited might crash the event. Someone who could bring with them a video, a recording, or a truth long buried beneath decades of lies. Even the name Helena Cassadine was whispered in dark corners, as though her sinister influence had never truly left the town. No one knew exactly what to expect, but everyone sensed they were walking into the opening act of a tragedy wrapped in glittering charm. Amid that atmosphere, the key figures of Port Charles were not idle. Laura, with her signature composure and sharp intuition, seemed to sense that something strange was afoot. She quietly observed Lucy, piecing together small clues from the odd behaviors of others, silent phone calls, sidelong glances, and invitations to the ball reprinted without clear explanation. Carly was busy preparing her gown, but her heart wavered under a vague instinct that this night might change everything for her family. Meanwhile, Ava appeared to be operating with an agenda of her own, having recently met with a new photographer, who would later be revealed as an undercover journalist determined to expose what the ladies of Port Charles had tried so desperately to conceal. And then, night fell. The lights beamed onto the red carpet, the music began to swell, and Lucy emerged in the most dazzling gown she had ever worn. All eyes turned toward the stage, where everything might begin with a sweet song and end with a devastating revelation. Glamour, danger, and shock, all waited to erupt, like a fuse primed to be lit. And just as Lucy had promised, this was not just a ball. This was the night Port Charles would never forget, etched in tears, applause, and whispered truths that could no longer remain hidden. As the curtain rose, a hush fell over the auditorium. Every seat was filled. And all of Port Charles's most pivotal figures were present, from those who once stood atop the city's hierarchy to those quietly nursing old wounds. Lucy stepped onto the center of the stage like a true star, her radiant smile lighting up the room. Yet anyone looking closely would have seen a flicker of tension behind her sparkling eyes. She knew this night could be her greatest triumph, or an unexpected downfall. And she was prepared for either. The opening act, a modern jazz number with intricate choreography by Maxie, Brooke Lynn, and Chase, brought vibrant energy to the room, sweeping away initial jitters. But only minutes later, something unusual happened. The stage lights flickered, then stabilized. And the large screen behind the performers lit up, not with the pre-programmed visuals, but with a strange, glitchy video. At first, it was only static, but then, a short recording played. It showed a confidential conversation between two individuals, one clearly a high-ranking hospital official, the other obscured, discussing the embezzlement of the previous year's nurses' ball charity funds. In the midst of this elegant evening, a scandal exploded before hundreds of stunned guests and live television cameras. Lucy froze on stage. The audience began to murmur, and some pulled out their phones to record what was unfolding. Laura stood up immediately, her face taut with concern as she watched the footage. Sonny glanced toward a dark corner of the auditorium, where Brick stood, expressionless. No one could tell whether he had any connection to the leak. Meanwhile, Carly turned to look at Drew, who was visibly trembling. There was something in his eyes, an unmistakable fear. As though he had known this would happen, but not like this. Though the video lasted less than a minute, its consequences rippled instantly. Lucy was rushed backstage in a panic. Several sponsors, including Valentine and other influential figures, began withdrawing from the event under the guise of personal emergencies. But it didn't end there. Just as the program attempted to recover with an operatic performance from Trina and Spencer, a piercing sound cut through the venue, a backstage technician screamed. Someone had broken into the control room. The intruder had vanished but left behind a single note taped to the console, "The truth cannot stay buried forever." Now, the focus had shifted entirely. It was no longer about the dresses or the performances, but about anxious glances, hushed caution, and a growing undercurrent of fear among the guests. Ava grabbed Nina's hand and whispered something that turned Nina's face ghostly pale. Clearly, Ava knew more than she had shared with anyone else. Meanwhile, Elizabeth, tasked with overseeing the event's medical needs, received an anonymous text message. Attached was an old photograph of her in a hospital room, forging medical records. The message read only, "You're next." In an effort to regain control, Magic Milo was finally brought on stage to perform, his act almost managing to lift the mood, until, mid-dance, the lights flickered again. This time, the screen behind him displayed a single line in bold red text, "Someone will fall tonight." A soft panic spread through the crowd. Some guests stood up, while security rushed to tighten their perimeter around the stage. Jordan, acting in her role as police commissioner, stepped forward and ordered all exits sealed. No one was to leave the building until every device was checked. Dressed in formal attire, the audience now felt less like attendees of a charity gala and more like characters trapped inside a Hitchcock thriller. And just when it seemed like the chaos had reached its peak, a man stepped onto the stage from backstage. His name was not on the guest list. He wore no badge of authorization. Yet he walked with purpose, as if the spotlight belonged to him. It was Lucky Spencer. He stood tall, scanning the stunned crowd. No greetings. No performance. Just one clear, steady declaration. I'm here to tell the truth. After Lucky revealed the entire truth under the dazzling lights of the nurses' ball, the entire auditorium sank into a deadly silence. There were no more rounds of applause, no more admiring eyes turned toward the stage, only shock, disarray. And the raw truth lingering in the air like an invisible blade slicing across the faces of those desperately trying to maintain composure. Port Charles. A town long accustomed to polished facades and eloquent words, now stood exposed, revealing deep fractures within what once seemed like an unshakable community. No one spoke. But everyone understood that the consequences would not be confined to this room. Those who believed their secrets could remain hidden forever now had to confront an undeniable reality, truth. Once exposed, demands the highest price. In the shadows behind the stage, uneasy eyes scanned for exits, fists clenched beneath expensive fabrics. And cold sweat trickled down the spines of the guilty. Some guests hastily left their seats, not out of outrage, but out of fear. Fear that more would be uncovered. Fear that the shield of power and wealth that once protected them had now crumbled. Across the auditorium, Victor quietly withdrew into the darker rows, his gaze calmly assessing the situation. He wasn't rattled, instead, his mind began calculating, turning like a well-oiled machine. For him, a scandal was never an end, it was an opportunity. He knew someone would fall. But if he played his hand correctly, he could repurpose the fallout to his advantage. Meanwhile, Elizabeth appeared barely able to stand. She felt as though everything she had worked so hard to protect, her reputation, her dedication to the hospital, was slipping away in mere minutes. Memories she had buried began to surge back, patients. Medical files, unethical decisions that now seemed to rise from the grave, demanding reckoning. At the same time, those tangentially involved, Nina, Carly, Sunny, and Ava, slipped into a defensive stance. They weren't directly implicated, but each carried something to lose, something they had once buried. With a USB file already broadcast containing damning audio, everyone realized there could be more. Sam, the one who brought the evidence to light, understood the danger she was in. But she could no longer live with suspicion and silence. The truth had been buried too long, and the cost of staying quiet was no longer worth paying. Jordan, acting as police commissioner, swiftly launched a formal investigation. A list of persons of interest was drawn up immediately. A team of technicians scoured the audiovisual system, retrieving data from servers to trace who had accessed and leaked the initial video. Security began interrogating everyone who had been backstage, turning the atmosphere into something more akin to an unofficial tribunal than a festive charity event. Throughout the long night that followed, Port Charles did not sleep. News of the scandal aired on local television within hours and spread across social media like wildfire. The image of Lucky standing center stage, holding a stack of documents, quickly became a new symbol of resistance and courage. Yet beneath the spotlight's glare, the town's most powerful figures were already orchestrating their countermeasures, quiet, ruthless, and methodical. Victor convened a private meeting with his closest allies, beginning a purge of those who might leak additional information. He hired a top-tier legal team, ready to deflect any charges that might come his way. At the same time, he dispatched people to locate and destroy any remaining copies of sensitive files while preparing to restore his image through new philanthropic initiatives. For Victor, losing a battle did not mean losing the war. Meanwhile, several doctors formerly involved in the illegal research program vanished. One fled town by private jet before dawn. Another locked their home and refused all contact with the press. But perhaps the most chilling development was the silence from those once considered untouchable. They offered no denial. No justification, no defense. They simply disappeared, like predators retreating to prepare for a more calculated, venomous strike. Lucy, in contrast, was thrown into an intense internal crisis. For her, the nurses' ball had always represented hope and unity, a night when the community of Port Charles could set aside its conflicts and celebrate something beautiful. But tonight, everything she had built had been strangled by a storm she never saw coming. She blamed herself for failing to control what happened backstage, for trusting too easily in the illusion of safety. And yet, from that shame rose a new fire. If the truth had been revealed, then she would be the one to lead the rebuilding, even if it meant confronting the most powerful enemies in town. Last night had been the nurses' ball, but tomorrow morning, Port Charles would awaken as something else entirely. A city no longer shielded. A city visibly cracking. A city bracing for the greatest storm it had ever known.